Start off the day, heat treating, recall 1, enter. Make sure I don't have anything in here. Nope. It is minus 32 degrees Celsius today. While we're waiting for the kiln to heat up, I just want to talk a little bit about heat treating 01 tool steel. I've had quite a few very specific questions on it lately, and I thought I could just address those right here. So 01 tool steel is a fantastic steel for a beginning knife maker to use. It's very easy to heat treat. Heat it up to around 1475, 1500 if I remember correctly. Quench it in some oil, and boom, you've got a hardened blade. The one thing that I have found too with mine, and this could be part of the problem that some of you have let me know that you're having, is that 01 tool steel cools down very quickly. I can notice a difference from when I pull it out of my kiln to when I get it in the oil. It seems to lose its color quicker than other steels. And that's just from my experience. I mean, I haven't done a lot of research on that, but I've kind of been paying attention to it. I'm like, this stuff cools down really, really fast. So part of that could be, and obviously, like, logically it makes sense that maybe the reason you're not getting a hardened steel is because it's not hot enough when it hits the oil. Now, to compensate for this, I actually set my kiln to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're doing it wrong. Yeah, sure. I do it work. 1600 degrees Fahrenheit. I let it sit there for about 10 to 15 minutes and pull it out, and I get really, really nice and hard. Nice hard knives after that. So just a little tip for you guys, if you're having troubles with your 01 tool steel, it might not be getting hot enough. As soon as this thing heats up, we'll put this in there for our soak, heat up our oil with a little scrap metal, and then we'll do our quench. Now, real quickly, one of the reasons you might want to heat up your oil, right now outside it's so cold. It's cold inside too, and my oil is really, really cold. When oil's cold, it's thicker, and basically like bubbles they're slower to move. So if you've got a warmed up oil, it's more viscous, right? It flows more easily. And as you put it in there, basically you're getting these vapors. It's boiling the oil around the blade, which creates an air pocket, which is an insulator compared to the oil. We want it to touch the oil as much as possible. We don't want the air to be all around it. So the thicker the oil, the colder the oil, the more it's gonna boil. Those bubbles aren't gonna leave, and basically your blade stays warmer longer. It doesn't cool as fast. So that's one of the main reasons why you'd want to preheat your oil. Different people have different temperatures. Some say like, about 125 degrees. Just get it warm so it flows really nicely, and that could also be part of the problem if you're having a hard time getting your blades hardened. Oh yeah, whoa, look at that. Oh yeah, I'm quenching a knife. Don't ever do that with your knife. That's foolishness. Oh, wow. It's also kind of fun. Anyways, that should have heated the oil up just Jim dandy. It's gonna do it again. Watch this. There it goes. This is so much fun. Like, who doesn't love knife making? So one of the reasons why you don't want all those flames coming up is because you're not actually getting the quench. I mean, it's cool and everybody thinks you're on Forged in Fire if you can do that, but it's absolutely useless, and it is the incorrect way to quench a blade. They just do that on television shows for dramatic effect. We're like 140 degrees, so that's pretty good. We're gonna quench our knife. And I'm gonna hold the blade in there so as to not allow a flare up, because I do not want to flare up. I want to quench. In we go. Oh, we got a flare. No, come on, stop flaring up. Come on, there we go. I mean, that's a little bit of oil on the surface on fire. And that's not hurting anybody, but if I'm pulling my blade out and it's like, that is not what you want. That's not a quench. The old standby method to see if it's sharp, if it's hardened. I do this with every knife because it's really quick, but you hear that real high-pitched skating sound? It's kind of like glass. This file is not cutting this knife at all. This knife, steel, right now, is harder than the file, which is exactly what I want. Sweet.
Over meadows, inside sprung grass, lungs breathing in the darkness. Love down low, scattered in the gravel. Vapor escapes us in thin air. Find the strength in my shortcomings.
Ready for our last temper cycle. 400 degrees for 2 hours. It's important to note that 01 tool steel does not actually require a cryogenic treatment. However, it does benefit. I've read some studies that show that it can increase its wear resistance as well as its stain resistance by up to 400%. And if I have cryo in my shop, I might as well use it. Many of the stainless steels, you really need to be giving them a cryo to properly heat treat them. 01 tool steel, not so much, but if we can make it just that much better, might as well do it. Now, I had no intentions of this second video being so far away from the first one in relation to time, but we've had some weather-related delays. The other night it got down to minus 38 degrees Celsius, and that is very close to that number in Fahrenheit because at minus 40, that's when those two scales meet. Doesn't matter which one you're looking at, it is freaking cold. Now, when you choose to drive older vehicles like I do, these weathers bring on the time that you kind of find out the weak spots of your older vehicles. I've had a few vehicle issues that I've had to deal with. In fact, the other night when we got down to minus 38, the battery on my truck froze and the sides were bulged out. It literally froze my battery and it cracked like this. Due to some of those issues that I've had to deal with, haven't been able to make a video on this. However, we have made some progress. The next step of this process, what we're gonna do is, you can see we've got our nice straw color here, our temper colors. So we need to start cleaning this thing up.
Lays on me, feels like an injury, soaked in luxury, a leopard in a hurry. Where's the waterfall, the source of it all? Where's the essence of me? Find the strength in my shortcomings, lies inside. Come on, walls, but money I try, but nothing myself forthcoming. Holy slow.
So I've gone up to 600 grit in aluminum oxide, and this here, they call it a film belt. It's 1200, and it's really weird. It doesn't even feel like an abrasive, and it's got a real soft backing on it, almost like a cloth backing. But this does a good job of kind of starting the initial polish. But see how that's really starting to put a nice shine on there? A little time here, and then once we're done with this, we're gonna jump to the cork belts. That's not mirror yet, but it's a good polish. And one thing I find helps when you're trying to get a really nice belt finish is essentially you have to bring it to the plunge line, right? And if we look at this, the plunge line is at this angle. And when I come to my platen, I start there and I hold the knife at the same angle, so I'm not rotating it back and forth like I am when I'm cutting in the bevels. Like when I'm cutting in the bevels, usually I kind of go like this a little bit. But when I'm finishing and getting the polish on, I like to go like this. That way I can keep all my lines running the same direction. And that is a huge thing that pays, it makes a difference when you're trying to get a really nice finish on there. So I'll clean up this other side and then we'll jump to the cork belt. The next step of the process is going to be tape this blade up and then work on the handle. I'm going to keep going on that, but that's going to be in the next video because I want to spend a bit of time talking about the handle stuff. And then also I've got another vehicle maintenance issue. I had a bulge. My tire got a bulge on the top, not on the sidewalls, on the top. So I need to spend some time tonight trying to find a set of the good winter tires, and then it might take me into tomorrow getting them installed. Anyways, all that cuts into editing time, but I would like to do a quick recap. After heat treat, we went to 120 grit ceramic, brand new belt. Did a few passes on that, mostly just to kind of work down the edge, get it nice and thin. We went to 12 thousandths of an inch. And then once we were happy with our surface there and it was nice and even, consistent, then we went to a 220, 400, and 600 grit aluminum oxide with a leather-backed platen. That leather just gives that extra bit of give, and it kind of adds, I call it blendability. It allows you to just do a pass and it's like the belt touches evenly on the entire thing, even though there might be slight imperfections on the absolute flatness. That leather backer just adds that forgiveness and that blendability. Another thing with the aluminum oxide is I use a brand new belt at every grit. And I won't use one of those belts on another set of bevels. Those will be reserved for, cleaning up, around handles, whatever. The reason for that is that those high grits, they load up so quick with material. And I've tried doing a couple knives with one belt, but what I find is that halfway into the second knife, you start to get these weird lines, these inconsistencies, and that's because a lot of the abrasive isn't effective because it's all loaded up with steel. So it seems like a waste, but I think that's the price to play the game sometimes, especially if you want to get into these real fine finishes, and that's just how it is. With that film belt, it's almost not like an abrasive, like it is almost slick to the touch. And I don't remember where I got it. I need to look for those again. If I find it in the future, I'll put a link to one in the video here, because that was one of these belts that I added when I was doing an order. I just, let's try this one. I always like to do that. I get one belt that I've never used before, and I've got a half a dozen or a dozen blades on that thing, and it still acts the way that it did with the first blade. So it seems to be a very long-lasting belt. And what I find that does is it just kind of lays a really nice foundation for getting a polish on there. Kind of takes that satin away and just kind of starts to build the polish. And then from there, we went to the cork belt with the green compound, and that does a nice job smoothing it up. And then we just kind of cleaned everything up and evened it all up with the little furnace motor buffer, and that was one of the loose buffs with the autosol. I'm going to keep cranking on this, and we'll be back at another video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. As always, I thank you so much for watching. Cheers.